girl sat alone on the floor of her room. It was dark and cold, surrounded in gloom. On the floor by her sat a piece of paper and a map, and an old tattered photograph placed on her lap. She ran her fingers across the map, following a line, and thought, if I can just get there, everything will be fine. Suddenly she heard footsteps from outside her door. She gathered up her papers and threw them in a drawer. She dove under the covers of a small-sized bed, and as the door opened wide, it filled her with dread. Was she caught? Had she been seen? Mimi was more nervous than she had ever been. Eventually the door closed and she sighed in relief and climbed back out of bed as quiet as a thief. She took back out her papers, some fabric and a stick, and some food that she'd been gathering, and tied them together quick. So she climbed from her window and walked into the night, and thinking of her mother, her heart filled with delight. The world at night was different than she was used to. It's so big and scary, she thought as the wind blew. Mimi began to feel little prickles of fear and said, it's only your imagination, there's nothing out here. She saw a fallen tree and decided to take a break. After hours of walking, her feet began to ache. A church bell rang out. It was now 10 o'clock. Nearly there, she realised with a small little shock. She stared at the photo of herself and her mother and wondered if they would like each other. Would her mother greet her with a kiss and a hug, or would she merely sneer and shrug? She'll be happy to see me, she heard herself say before packing up her belongings and carrying on her way. She eventually found the sign she was looking for. Soon she'd be knocking on her mother's front door. But as she rounded the corner, before her eyes was a sight that gave her a nasty surprise. In place of white picket fences and lawns tidy and neat, there were overgrown hedges and litter on the street. So she took a deep breath and knocked on the door, not wanting to delay the moment anymore. Mimi heard footsteps and the scraping of locks, and before her stood a woman in a dressing gown and socks. She looked down at Mimi and gave her a sneer, and poor little Mimi trembled in fear. But still Mimi handed her the old photograph, and the woman didn't know whether to cry or to laugh. A look of disdain finally took its place as she slammed the door in Mimi's face. Mimi just stood there. What had just happened? And as she stared at the door, her thoughts and mood blackened. She knew this could happen when looking for her mother. It would go one of two ways. She'd hoped it would be the other. Mimi calmly gathered wood, a box and an old tyre, and on her mother's front doorstep she built a nice little pyre. She took out a small lighter and thought, this is how she pays, and touched the flame to the pile and set the whole lot ablaze. She watched it burn and thought, fire really is quite pretty, before walking back down the path and feeling no pity. And so she made her way home knowing she wouldn't be caught. I hope I make it back for breakfast was her only thought.